Okay, welcome back. We're at our 5th interview here at Super Zoo. I'm really excited to have an icon in the pet industry, someone who's been distribution, pet shops. He's done everything basically, and that's Mr. Phil Cooper.
Hi, Gary. Great to see you again. Great to be here. This is about my 50th Super Zoo.
50th?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you don't look a day over 50 though.
Well, I feel like a little older than that, but I'm still going strong, and I love the pet industry just like you do.
I do. I love this industry. Once we get in it, we can't get out.
No,
it's like a disease, right?
It's kind of like an illness. You have it, you never get rid of it.
No, you never get out. That's for sure. Well, Guy, your whole history is really colorful and really long. I mean, you were like me. We started when we were little kids, and you had a paper route when you were 13, and your parents let you use the money to buy 2 squirrel monkeys. What were your parents thinking?
Well, fortunately, my grandmother had a parrot that lives in the family for 72 years.
72
So when we went to visit her, that's the first place we went. And so we were used to exotic stuff. And my parents, fortunately, indulged me and let me have all kinds of unique things. And that's where I got my love for animals.
That's great.
And, you know, once you're in this business, you never get out. This is my 57th year in the pet business.
That's awesome. That's amazing. So you took that squirrel monkeys and those 2 and you parlayed them into a capuchin, a white-faced capuchin.
Yeah, white-faced capuchin.
You wanted a little bit bigger monkey.
Yeah.
And then your mom got you a 10-gallon aquarium, and that really wrecked you.
Oh, it really wrecked me. I couldn't believe it. I had one 10-gallon aquarium, and then I had a Molly who gave me babies. And God forbid you lose the babies. I bought a 2.5-gallon tank for the babies like that one.
Right.
And then I had 4 aquariums, and then I had 10 aquariums, and then I had 20 aquariums. And I went in the business to save my hobby.
Right.
And that's how I opened up my first store, with that 72-year-old parrot and 25 aquariums. And I was in the Air Force at the time, and I was working nights in the base and during the days in the pet store and having a great time.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to be able to have done that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Were you in Vietnam?
I was served during the Vietnam era.
Okay.
I was stationed 200 miles north of home.
Okay.
At Fort Smith Air Force Base. I volunteered for Vietnam, Thailand, Germany, anywhere I could go. I couldn't leave Michigan to save my soul. and the good news was that I was able to run that pet store while I was in the Air Force.
That's great.
My commander was my #1 tropical fish customer. And the worst duty I ever had was we had a lot of body bags coming back, and I had to do funeral detail and present the flag to the families, and it tore me up because I'm a real emotional guy.
Yeah.
And that's the worst of it. My best friend was a Green Beret, and he's on the wall in Washington as an MIA. And
wow.
So we have a rich history, and I was fortunate to be stationed here and be able to put my time in and still do something I love.
Yeah, and you have. I mean, I read your history, and it's incredible. I mean, you got discharged from the Air Force, and you had a store that went, an aquarium store, full line. And then you met Clark Odell, founder of Odell Aquariums.
And we used to share shipments from South America's saltwater when it was just beginning.
Really?
And he was the guy that one day was watching TV, and a guy knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I got this new glue you can patch broken plates with." And he looked at it. It was clear silicone. He thought, well, this is kind of fun. I wonder if it would hold 5 pieces of glass together and hold water. And he did that, and he said, you know, it works. It's pretty strong.
Wow.
So he started building aquariums in his garage first, and then got a little investment money and opened up a small factory. And I sold my store, and I joined them as their first salesman, became the national salesman. I was traveling coast to coast selling 40-footers of glass boxes, and we were replacing every stainless steel tank there ever was. And I got to know everybody in the industry from that, because we were flying all over the place doing trade shows.
Wow.
One of my early trade shows was at the Los Angeles Marriott Hotel in the basement, and I wore a catfish costume, Matt the Catfish, and we took the name Matt from Mattel, our biggest competitor, and Harvey Feinberg, which is a dear friend who was a national sales manager at Metaframe. I used to go stand by his booth, hand out Odell brochures. And, you know, but back then you could have that kind of fun even with your competitors.
Right, right.
and it was a lot of fun.
Do you have a picture of that? Because I
do.
really want to see a picture of that.
I do have a picture.
All right. Well, make sure you send that to us for the video. That's for sure. So, before we get off Odell, because they had their own little history, but I just want to know one thing. Odell kind of went through two phases. The original phase, and they made those cool metal stands. And then they went to that wood phase with the wood stands and the tanks. A little bit of a leakage problem sometimes. I mean, I remember stores saying they weren't the original Odell. So what happened?
Well, what happened was we were in Saginaw, Michigan.
Yeah.
We were competing in the labor market with the automotive companies. And we actually had our own metal fabricating plant. We were making those stands. And then the management decided that we couldn't compete in Saginaw anymore because we couldn't pay the wages because every time the GM would hire, we'd lose half of our sales, our workforce. And so we bought a 20-acre facility in Marietta, Georgia, where we moved everything to Georgia.
Right.
And that's when we started making wooden stands.
Right.
And back then, with the plastic frames, we used silicone as a sealant on the frames, but we would get what was called capillary leaks. That would come down that little spot where there was no glue. It would leak down, and it would create a problem, and that's where that problem came from.
I always thought that it was sold somehow. From the first Odell was sold to another big venture capital company.
Sold. We did sell out to a venture capital company eventually, and that's when I left the company.
Right.
Because they weren't listening.
Right.
But nonetheless, we had this big facility in Georgia, and that's when everything began to change.
Wow. Thanks for that's great to get that information. I love that. So from Odell, did you go to work for distribution for Wolverton?
Well, yeah, I went. I left because I was unhappy with the direction of the company, and I went to work for a great distributor in Michigan who was one of the firms that educated me about pet products. Wolverton Distributing down in Rinky, God bless him. He took the time to help this little young guy, taught me about the business a little bit, told me about margins, told me about all those things. And so I went to work for him, and he gave me a territory from North Detroit up to Alpena. And I had to drive 50 miles between accounts. Right. And it was tough because he gave me all the customers they'd been thrown out or didn't like their salesman or were unhappy.
You got the B and C stores.
I got those. And what I did, I bought a van when vans weren't popular. And I filled it up full of Tetramin, full of ball bearings for the Metaframe Dynaflow filters. And I walk into a store and they say, well, we don't want to deal with you guys because we're unhappy about the last guy. I said, listen, you're out of Tetramin for the weekend. I got some in the truck. Would you like some? Oh, okay. So I brought it in. I had one line on the order form. And then, you got some Dynaflows to return. I know what's wrong. It's the ball bearings.
Sure.
I got ball bearings in the truck. Let's fix those. And that's how I began. And before I left, the territory was doing pretty well. But the reason I left is because I got a job offer to join Marineland Aquarium Pet Products here in Los Angeles. And I was living in Saginaw, Michigan. When I went out for the interview, it was 18 below in Saginaw. I landed in Los Angeles, it was 85. I said, this is how I need to live. And that's why I lost my deposit on my home in Marietta, Georgia that I bought and moved to Los Angeles instead.
And you still live in California, right?
I still live in California, but I took a little detour. I lived in Thousand Oaks for quite a while. Then I moved up to Sacramento. And then I took a 5-year hiatus and moved to Sydney, Australia.
Right. Well, we won't get into that yet.
We won't get into that.
Yeah, because I want to go into Marineland for a minute. Now, when we say Marineland, when I was a kid, there was Marineland of the Pacific, which was a huge water park, right?
Yeah, and we had no connection to those.
But you were called Marineland.
Yeah, Marineland Aquarium and Pet Products.
Right.
That's how we got around the infringement of Marineland.
They didn't try to sue?
They didn't try to sue.
Really?
Bob Sherman owned Marineland at the time, and he was one of the original owners of Aquastock in New York and opened up Aquastock in Los Angeles.
Really?
Yeah.
Who was his partner?
Well...
What's that guy's name?
I don't remember. You're thinking of Bruce.
Bruce
wasn't his partner. Bruce took over Aquastock after Bob sold it to invest in Marineland.
I thought Bruce was the partner in that, but he wasn't.
Well, he may have been.
Okay.
That I can't speak for 100%, but Bruce was the ultimate owner after Bob devoted all of his time to Marineland.
Just a little segue here. One of the great mysteries and things that I want for the museum badly my whole life is the Aquastock Company in Beverly Hills, yes. Beverly Boulevard.
Yeah.
It was an incredible neon sign, all different colors, animals, everything. It was the most beautiful sign, and nobody knows where it went to. It just disappeared.
I don't have any idea where it went.
I know. I'm
Bruce
beside
is still alive.
He
Maybe
is?
We got to track him down.
Can you track him down? Give me his
will.
number.
I'll do my best.
All right, thank you. So back to Marineland. I'm sorry. So Marineland was really a great company. They had a lot of products.
They were a phenomenal company. They had a guy named Chuck Faust who was their engineer and designer, and he came from Hollywood, and he was a fabricator of props.
Right.
And he could make anything. In fact, funny story. He made lances for a big medieval movie they were doing in Hollywood. And the first one he made, he had to finish in his garage over the weekend. So he drove home in his motorcycle with this 15-foot lance to finish it at home and took it back. But he actually fabricated the first Marineland power filter, which was in competition to the Dynaflow.
Wow.
In his garage. And I took that on the road and sold it, and it was a prototype, a working prototype, but everybody thought it was finished product because he was such a great fabricator.
Wow, that's amazing. Didn't they develop the bio wheel? They
did the bio wheel. That was after I left. They
Right.
also had, at the time, a hamster ball, which was
Really?
invented by a friend of mine, but Marineland sold more hamster bottles than we ever sold power filters.
Of course.
And so we had, in the first replacement pads for power filters was a Marineland product. And then we had the bubble wand.
Remember
that
those?
was a unique product.
That was huge.
That was a Marineland staple.
I love those. They should bring those back.
They should. They were great.
They were awesome, and they were huge. They had really long ones. You don't even see those anymore. Yeah. God, you're bringing back memories now, I tell you. Okay, well, all right. So Marineland, we know Sherman sold it.
Well, he sold it, and then they changed quite a bit. But Bob moved me out from Saginaw to be a member of the company, and they were a small company, didn't have a whole lot of money to support the travel I needed to go out and sell this filter.
Yeah.
And, I'm a pretty bashful guy, and I've had businesses. And I walked into Bob one day, I said, listen, you don't need me. You need somebody you can hire for a little less money to be on the phone, and that was June Heaster. And I hired June Heaster to replace me. And Bob said, listen, I'll pay for you to go to the next trade show, get a job. I said, okay. So I flew from LA to Florida at a PIDA show, where I was approached to be a manufacturer's rep by Harding Willinger from the Willinger Brothers. And I walked away from that show, and I had the Willinger Brothers, I had Aquarium Systems, I had Prevue Hendryx bird cages, I had 5 phenomenal lines. And at the time, there was only one rep on the West Coast, or 2. Hank Manriquez was one, and then Ray Dickmeyer was the other one. And they were heading in different directions, so I became a rep, and I was the highest volume sales rep for 20 years on the West Coast. Because I learned a lesson early, and that was if I sold truckloads of stuff, I could make less commission but more money than the other guys who insisted on a high commission and sold small quantities. So I was selling aquariums by the truckload, I was selling salt by the truckloads, I was selling bird cages by the truckload, Estes gravel by the truckload, and we were selling 40, 45 truckloads of something every month.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
God. Do you have any good stories about like Alan Willinger and the people like that? They were like
amazing stories.
Yeah, they're just
Alan and Harding Willinger were mentors of mine.
And Harding was the sales guy, and Alan was the inventor. Right?
Alan was the inventor. Harding was the sales guy. And of course, as you know, and I've seen on your videos, they got involved and started Metaframe.
Right.
From Wheel Nest to Metaframe. And Harding told me a story once that he made more money when he left Mattel off his Barbie stock than he ever made in the pet industry. But when you think about the Willingers, besides selling, making the first air pump, which was really a blurper. It only blurped out air about every 3 seconds. Now, before that, when we had aquariums, we got duckweed for the top and plants because that's how we gave oxygen to the fish.
Right.
With the first blurper, it would be like boom, bloop, air coming out, and that's how the first air pump. So from that, Alan developed the Hush pumps,
Right.
Hush 1, 2, and 3. And then after they got out of Mattel and the non-compete ran out, they did the Whisper pumps.
Right.
And so, but Alan invented the battery-operated AquaVac,
Right.
the first aquarium heater, the first air pumps in the industry, and the list is that long. Alan had lunch with the director of the patent office in about 1982 because Alan was like number 7 in the country with the most patents.
That's incredible.
And I mean, he was a brilliant guy. And funny story. Harding had his teeth redone, and he had the
Caps or
caps. And we were at a show one time, and he was eating a pistachio, and he broke the front cap.
the cap?
And he was, I don't want to talk to customers, right? So Alan goes back and gets some super glue, sits him down in the chair, and meticulously puts the cap back together
With super glue?
And you would swear it was perfect. So Harding could continue the show.
Because Alan wasn't going to do it. He was too shy, right?
Oh yeah. So but he could do that. He was that meticulous, and and with the plants that he made, the Plantastics.
Yeah.
The story was, we had these artificial metaframe plants which he developed.
Right.
But he was a perfectionist. So what he did, he got freeze-dried examples of all the top 5, 6 aquarium plants, and he smuggled them into China. And there he could, and every leaf of every plant was etched so we could get enough good bacteria growth on the plants. And he did all that with every plant that he did from the freeze-dried samples.
Wow.
And then we launched the first aquarium plant stand with 5 different sizes, and we wound up having one of those in every pet store in the United States.
Yeah.
And then we had a Whisper pump display that had 8 Whisper pumps on display that no one ever had before. We had that in every pet store in the United States.
That's
And,
crazy.
I mean, we would sit around and we were at my dining room table in my home one day. He said, I'm thinking about this change with an aquarium net. He said, how do you think we ought to change aquarium nets? He said, they've been made the same way forever. I said, well, about the only thing I could recommend is you have a hanger, because everybody puts the aquarium net underneath and it never dries out properly, and you always look for it when you're looking for it. He said, well, I've done better than that. He said, I plastic coated the wire. I've got a better mesh that doesn't get clogged up, and I put a handy hanger so you can hang it behind your tent. And so, we had those kinds of meetings all the time, and we talked about whatever. And in fact, when they finally sold out to Tetra, the way that came about was I was in Australia with Mark Long, who was a national salesman at Tetra at the time, and he was saying, well, we're looking for acquisitions. And I said, we ought to buy the Willinger brothers. I said, John is very active in the business, has done a marvelous job, but John's the only heir that has interest in the business, and the boys are getting a little bit older, and they may want to retire. And so I said, here's Harding's number, give him a call, and they had a meeting, and that's how Tetra wound up buying Willinger.
Wow. And I heard it was like an all-cash deal, and it was a nice, sweetheart deal, because
I heard it was. I never knew.
Yeah, I never knew the particulars.
If I knew, would I ever say? But, the Willingers treated me like family, and John is still a dear friend.
Wow.
Harding and Alan, I mean, they did things that, when I was first starting as a rep, I get a call one day from Harding. He says, how you doing? I said, I'm doing fine. I got 5 major lines. He said, yeah, I know you're doing fine, because you're always doing fine, but do you have enough money to do the territory and make the sale? I said, yeah. He said, if you ever need help, you let me know. I want you to be out there. I want you to be successful. No one ever would do that in the pet industry prior to that.
Wow.
But that's the kind of people they were. They were very willing to do whatever they can to support the sales staff. And we had 5 of the greatest pet industry salesmen out there selling plants and pumps, and the rest is all history.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. God. Driftwood Arts, I remember them. They were that Driftwood company that put it on the slate.
Funny story. I came back from Florida from the job, And I get a call from the gentleman who owned Driftwood Arts. He said, I hear you're a pretty good salesman. I said, well, don't believe everything you hear. I said, but I could probably sell a piece or two. He said, well, I'd like to talk to you. And so I'm sorry, I was wrong. It was when I was with Odell, because I found a piece of that driftwood. And I told my boss, because I used it at trade shows to demonstrate the tanks, I didn't want empty boxes. I wanted them to look like real aquarium.
Right.
And so my boss said, why don't you fly out there and talk to the guys, see if we can buy driftwood and sell it nationally. So I flew from Saginaw to Cleveland, Cleveland to Boston, Boston to Bangor, and then drove 300 miles. And I wound up that night on the living room floor eating pancakes with homemade maple syrup. And we were talking about driftwood. And they would go out and they would pay young kids to collect from the rivers and streams in there all these big stumps and big pieces. And like true artisans in a Quonset hut, they would look at that stump and say, I cut it there, cut it there, cut it there.
Wow.
Stainless steel screw on slate, and we could sell it that way. Well, we never got a chance to acquire the company, but the first month they flew to California to present me my first commission check.
Wow.
Because I opened up 30 distributors with Driftwood.
Oh my God.
And that's how that came about.
That's amazing.
It was amazing.
What a great story. Aquarium Systems.
That's a real amazing story. Ed Mocha was working for the gentleman who had the formula.
He's here today.
Yeah, I know he's here.
Yeah.
I had a chance to run into Ed earlier. So again, the same group that represented Willinger, we got Ed to meet everybody, and he hired the same group of salesmen reps to start selling Instant Ocean. And we started just selling salt. We were selling it by the truckloads. And then we started selling their heaters, and we started selling their water pumps, and we started doing everything. And then Ed acquired, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, he expanded quite a bit.
Right.
We sold everything they had, and we did very well.
Why do you think Instant Ocean became the most successful marine salt?
Well, number one, we were really the first, and Ed, with the sales staff, we all had personal relationships. Not like today when nobody wants to see you; they want to do it on the computer, on a Zoom call, or on the phone.
Right.
We knew the buyers. We knew the buyer's wife's name. We knew the kids' birthdays, and we went out to dinners and luncheons with all these people. So when I got on the phone and said, "Hey, you need to buy Aquarium Systems," okay, if you think I need it, send me a truckload.
Wow.
And we just opened up people because we had these great relationships.
Yeah.
And we gave instant distribution.
That's incredible. God, you've had quite a history. Now, All Glass.
Well, Odell, when I left Odell, the second, I left Odell, and then they called me back to be their sales rep on the West Coast.
Right.
And then, like all big corporations who take over businesses, the first thing they look at is the guys who are making too much money.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of those guys because we can save a lot of money. And they fire all the people who built the business. And it drives me nuts when that happens.
Right.
And so I was no longer with Odell, but I knew Roger and Jerry Rizzo well from the trade show.
From All Glass.
So I called Roger and he said, let's have a talk. And I took all of the business away from Odell and turned them into All Glass distributors. Again, because of the relationship.
Sure.
And one day I'm in Roger's office and we're talking about aquariums, and his desk is wood grain, oak, and his phone's wood grain, oak, and he's everywhere we look, it's oak finish on things. I said, Roger, people don't want black frames anymore. Right. They want wood grain and they want oak. He said, you think? I said, we need to do that. And so at the next global show, APPMA show, we introduced oak frames and walnut frames at the show, and biggest show we ever had. All of a sudden, we had a truckload of not black frames anymore, but oak and wood grain. Wood grain, and that's how that all began.
God, I remember those days. I remember those tanks. What about any other companies stand out to you? Like, what about
countless companies?
what about Prevue though?
Well, a Prevue was an interesting story
me.
because I met Rick and we got to be really good friends, and we started selling Prevue again, truckloads. That was what I wanted, and I sold PetSmart their first parrot cage, and I got them in the PetSmart. I got them in the Petco back in the early days. I sold PetSmart when they had one store, Petco when they had three, and watched all the growth, the public, the private, and all that stuff. But Prevue was a very interesting company, and I was a bird guy also my whole career, so it was really fun to be involved with those guys, and so it was a lot of fun. But a couple of interesting stories I'll tell you. I was the first rep for many companies in the pet industry, and I was doing a trade show standing next to Jim Stout when he first began at Coastal, and we got along really well. He said, "Why don't you become my rep?" I said, "Jim, unfortunately I'm selling this other company of collars, and I've given them my commitment, and I got to sell theirs instead of your stuff." He said, "No problem." So I got to know Jim, and we became great friends. And in my career, 2 other occasions, he approached me, and every time he approached me, I had just taken on another competitive line. And he said, "Well, quit him and join me." I said, "Jim, that's not how I roll. I give somebody a commitment. I got to live up to the commitment."
Right.
And sure enough, in both cases, 6 months later, it didn't work out. I wish I called Jim. He said, "Phil, I'm okay. I got a rep right now, and I'm happy." And so I'm the only guy in the industry that said no to Jim Stout 3 times.
Oh my God.
And terrible decision, because everybody made a lot more money than I made selling collars and leads. And then the
Coastal
funny
was
story,
big.
I was selling a line called Circle T Leather, beautiful leather material that Jim acquired. And the guy, and I introduced this guy to Jim, and so Jim acquired it, and the seller called me up on Saturday and said, "I got great news. You're going to be a Coastal rep finally again," because I just sold out to Jim. I said, "Great. Finally, I'm going to sell Coastal." And then on Monday, Jim called me and said, "Fella, I got to let you go because I got a sales guy and we're giving him Circle T."
Oh,
and
no.
So I lost Circle T, but that's okay. We're still very good friends, and that was fun. And then this young guy called me who was working on his truck one day, and there was this big rubber part that broke off, and he threw it on the ground, and his dog chased it, and it happened to look a little bit like a Kong toy. And so Joe Markham called me up and said, "Hey, I got this new toy. Would you sell it?" I said, "I'd love to sell it." I said, "But you only have one size and it's black." I said, "And I've got this toy line of 300 latex toys. I need to have you make a deal with them so we can get you distribution."
Right.
Because back then, the distributors didn't want to buy one product.
No.
Company product. So I got him to have an alliance with the toy company, and we opened up Kong and all the distributors. And then the company sold out a year later, and they let me go. And then Joe didn't get along with the new owner, so he went on to Kong on his own, and my dear friend Jim Mello became his rep, and Jim, 35 years later, is still the rep for Kong, and I lost that opportunity. So
they sold again, actually.
They sold again, yeah. So
I remember Joe, and that was a solid rubber toy. I don't know where he got the rubber from, but
and he made it real thick, and
he did.
You'll know he always had this machine at the show,
right, to show you how,
and press down to show how tough it was.
Metal jaws.
And that's what made Kong what it is.
Yeah.
So
he's a good salesman.
Those kinds of people. I mean, I have been so fortunate to be on the ground level with some just incredible founders in the pet industry.
I know.
And I wish, and thank God to you that you're trying to keep these memories alive, because without all these people, the industry wouldn't be.
It wouldn't look like this. No. I know, it's true, especially the innovation that happened back then. It was just amazing to me. So tell me about Australia now.
Well, I was a rep, as I mentioned, and I was very successful, and I had a big team. And one day I went in to call on PetSmart with a vendor, and the buyer, who was a good friend of mine, he looked at me and he looked at the vendor and said, "I want his commission because we need to improve our margins." And so I don't want a sales rep to call on me anymore. I want his commission. And I'm like, my jaw dropped because I can't believe this is happening in front of me.
Yeah.
And the good news was my vendor said, hey, listen, Phil's been with me for 15 years, and if you want to buy our product line, you got to buy it from Phil. I'm not letting him go. He's been very good for us, and that's the way it's got to be. But I saw the handwriting on the wall, and I thought, boy, if this is the way it's going to be, I'm not going to be able to survive, nor my team.
Sure.
Because I've got a team of 7 people. We're all doing very well.
Right.
But if this is the way it's going to be, and that's exactly what was happening on a regular basis. So I thought, well, maybe it's time for me to get out of the rep business because I think my days are numbered. And this friend of mine who was a member of the Olympic Committee in Australia, and he said, let's talk about bringing you down to Australia. We have an 80-year-old business we want to grow. Uh-huh. And so we all met in Perth, Australia for a holiday, and it was Alan Welton, my dear friend, and then 2 dear friends from New Zealand joined us, and my wife and I, and we hatched this plan to buy the company, the 80-year-old company, build it, and then sell it off. And the goal was 5 years, we'll sell it off. So I gave up the rep business, left the U.S., and moved to Sydney, Australia, and we began building the business. And at the time, Australia, although they're great people and they do a lot of things right, but was very archaic because at the time, they only sold rainbow gravel. You couldn't buy gravel in 9 colors. It was either rainbow or natural. That was it. I said, well, wait a minute. We're missing a big opportunity. We need to have all these colors of gravel, and we can build the aquarium business. And we went down there, and at the time, we had 27 retail stores. We had a big distribution company, and then we also manufactured our own product line, imported it, Master Pet brand that we sold to grocery stores and hardware stores as they were beginning to unfold. And we built the business 2.5 times its size in 5 years. And I was there during Sydney 2000 when the Olympics came. And because of my partner, and he was very well connected. I knew the Prime Minister. I knew a lot of great people, some of the great Olympians in Australia, Don Fraser and others. And so I got a chance to run the Olympics pretty free while I was there.
Really?
And it was the most marvelous experience, and I encourage anybody to ever do that because we're in a stadium of 140,000 people, and the Aussies love us Yanks. And so not only do they erupt when the Australian team comes out, but they also erupt when the American team comes out. And
that's great.
Here are 140,000 people cheering for your flag. And, you know, I wish everybody could live in a foreign country for a little while to understand how great of a country we have.
I know, I agree.
So that's what we did in Australia. And I sold out. I came back and thought about retiring, and I got recruited by a number of big corporations to build other pet companies.
They're not going to let you retire.
No, I love the business too much to do it. And I can't sit still, and I don't fish, I don't hunt. I'm like you, I got to keep
got to keep going, I know. I was up at 5 o'clock this morning, and I go, I can't lay in bed.
Yeah.
I got to get up.
I'm the same way.
So, okay, 2 figures I want to talk about, big figures. Hearts. Let's talk about hearts for a minute.
Well, Leonard Stern.
Right.
And again, I go back to my first pet store.
He's the only billionaire in the pet industry, right?
My first pet store, you had one type of birdseed. You had Hearts Mountain birdseed.
Right.
And that was before it ever wound up in a grocery store. And so we pushed hearts. And Leonard Stern had the vision that, hey, I got to sell a lot of birdseed. So to do that, I got to sell a lot of birds. And back in New York at the time, just like aquarium stores regionally, there were independent bird breeders all over the place with parakeets and cockatiels and canaries. And the only way you can sell more birdseed is to sell more birds.
Right.
So he started buying up all these birds from independent breeders, and then he broke into the first grocery store. And the funny story behind that was he had a 20-store chain of grocery stores that he wanted to put the birdseed and birds into, and the guy was kind of on the fence. So Howard said, tell you what, we'll put the birds in, the bird seed in, we'll buy out whatever you have to make space for my product. So he was willing to do that. But then again, his salespeople, he gave money to so they could go in and buy retail off the shelf his own product from those 20 stores. Well, they went from what they had to sales like this in a 6-8 week period.
Sure.
And the owner said, "What am I doing? I need to have more pet products."
Right.
And so that's how that began. And then, of course, as happens in the pet industry, we've got major brands who decide they need a bigger market, so they move to grocery, they move to mass.
Sure.
And the pet stores feel a little bit betrayed because they built their business on our backs and we were loyal, and now they can buy it cheaper at Kroger than they can buy it at my store.
Yeah, Hearts.
Yeah, Hearts. And over the years, I've had a lot of dealings with Hearts, and and I've competed against them with dog toys and other things that they do. But Leonard Stern, if it wasn't for him, there wouldn't be a bird business, because he found a way. And the Willingers were the same way. When they were at Metaframe, there were no distributors.
Right.
So they had relationships with a big Chicago distributor, and they had 10 great sales guys. And so what he did at a dinner one night said, Pete Peterson, "Hey, Pete, if you want to open up a distribution company, we'll give you inventory and you can pay for it over 10 years.
Wow.
But we would need to have you have an inventory so we can sell it to pet store." So we hired Pete Peterson to open up a distribution company. And then he hired Dan Suk to move to Seattle and do the same thing. Then he hired Walt Ebers to come to Los Angeles and open up a distribution company. And they opened up about 10 distributors that way.
Peterson Pet,
Hammer Pet, and the list is long, but it was Harding that had the vision. And even San Francisco Bay Brand. Andy's father, Anton, was collecting brine shrimp, but didn't have national distribution. So Harding made a deal with Anton to make San Francisco Bay Brand a brand under the Metaframe banner, and gave him national distribution, because now he had distributors.
Right.
And those visionaries, I mean, you'll never ever find any monuments of sales guys, but I maintain that all these founders of the big businesses here were sales guys first.
Probably.
Because they had to get out there and sell the story. And so, it was that kind of vision that opened up the markets for what it is today.
Pete Peterson's son, Michael Peterson, is a rep.
He's a rep in Southern California.
In Southern California.
And the other son was on the East Coast as a salesman.
Oh, really?
For a long time too. Yeah. In fact, here's another story that nobody knows. I was supposed to be Cooper Ammerpet in Los Angeles.
Really?
Because Pete pulled me aside one day and said, "Phil, we know you can do well at whatever you do, and we need to open up a division in Los Angeles, and we want to buy." Trying to think of the guy's name, I can't remember. But there was a small cash and carry in Los Angeles, wasn't doing very well. And the plan was we were going to buy that and make it a Cooper Ammerpet in Los Angeles.
Was it Trico, was it?
It wasn't, no, that was, Trico was different.
Right.
Don Sonderling. Don Sonderling had the first little cash and carry.
All right.
And Trico had one almost at the same time, but it was very small and didn't have much vision at the time. And so we went into the attorney's office in San Francisco, and the way the deal was, I just couldn't agree to it. So I said, "Pete, I would do almost anything in the world for you, but I can't do that." And so they wound up getting Sam Saxton. And that's how that Anapet began.
Wow.
And, so I've had an opportunity many times in my career to do a lot of interesting things.
No kidding.
I had an offer when I was a pet store owner in Odell to move to Florida to run a fish farm.
Really?
Back then. And I came about that close to doing it.
Which fish farm was it?
Oh, I can't remember now the name of it. I mean, I met some very interesting people early. Sam Hoffmeister in Michigan was making heaters before Allen was making heaters with black stoppers at the top that you couldn't submerge.
And there was two. You had the thermostat and the heating element next to each other.
He wanted me to help him grow that business, and I didn't do that. But the first fish farm was interesting. But when I came down, I got to meet a lot of the fish farmers, and I met Bern Levine from Pet Farm, and I met Gators of Miami.
Wow.
And I was buying exotic stuff because back then there was no restrictions, there was no licenses required. And in my store, I could sell monkeys, I could sell lions.
You could buy an elephant.
Sell sun bears, I could sell all kinds of stuff that today you could never even get close to.
No, those days are gone.
Those days are long gone. But Bern Levine's another guy that was instrumental.
Good guy.
A good guy.
Yeah.
And
he's fought for our industry too.
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah.
If it wasn't for him, we'd be in trouble.
So the last figure is Axelrod.
Herbert Axelrod, funny story. Herbert Axelrod was one of the most unique characters you ever wanted to visit. And he had two reputations. He was a bit of a philanderer, which we won't talk about. Because Evelyn, no one ever wanted to tell Evelyn what Herb was doing when he was on the road.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Herb Axelrod, TFH Publications, really saw the need to educate the pet industry.
Right.
And TFH started with the TFH magazine.
Right.
And we religiously got that so we could pull out the two new additions to our TFH binder.
Right, exactly.
And add it to our collection of tropical fish. And so knew those guys pretty well. And he had a salesman, Stanley Bruce, Mort Cam.
Okay.
First salesman for TFH. Great guy. Good friend of mine. He was traveling all over the country selling books, and every distributor had a room full of books, and every pet store had 3 TFH racks full of books, and that's how we educated people before computer. But while I was at Odell, we wanted to do a fish calendar, and we wanted to give the calendar away with every aquarium you bought. So that was the first big promotion we ever had.
Right.
And so my boss said, "Listen, we need to do a fish calendar. Can you get some pictures?" I said, "Well, yeah, I can do that, but the place to go would be TFH." So as an old hobbyist, I made a phone call and talked to the guy at TFH and said, "Listen, we'd like to get some pictures from you, and we'll buy them because we want to make a calendar." And he said, "Sure, come on to New Jersey." And so I get on a plane, I fly to New Jersey, and as a pet store owner and a hobbyist, I got this preconceived vision of what TFH is going to look like when I get there. I'm imagining hundreds of aquariums, because how do they take their photographs, right? I want to learn all this stuff. I was so excited, I can't wait to meet the band, Herb Axelrod. And so I get there, and Herb Axelrod, we have a nice conversation, and that's when I met him the first time. And then he passed me off to the number 2 guy, and he said, "You want photos? There's a bank of 20 file cabinets." He said, "You spend the day going through there and pick out the ones you want."
Wow.
I said, "Well, but I don't see any aquariums." He said, "Yeah, we got one." I said, "Well, how do you take these pictures?" He said, "Well, I'll give you a little bit of a hint." He said, "Occasionally we film from this aquarium, but not very often, because most of the time hobbyists send us pictures and we get the photos from them and we give them credit, but that's how we get most of our pictures from private parties." He said, "But occasionally we set up the aquarium," and I said, "Well, how do you get them to pose perfectly?" He said, "We put a piece of glass in the aquarium triangulate with the fish on the front side, and then we press the glass forward to press the fish in place so we can take the photograph. And then when we're done, we take the glass out, and that's how we take the photograph." And so I pick out the pictures of the calendar. We do the calendar. We give away 100,000 of them. And I sent a note to Herb, and I said, "Hey, I want you to have a dozen copies of the calendars. I'm real pleased that we use your photos." And he sent me only negative comment. And he said, "As hard as you worked, I thought the calendar would have been better." And that's the only correspondence I had from her afterwards. But interesting character. He also
He is.
collected Stradivariuses.
Yeah, we know about the violin problem.
About all that stuff. And so, interesting character.
He was quite a character in the industry. He really was.
Yeah.
As was Al Simon of Four Paws.
Al Simon. I was next to Al Simon when he first started selling Four Paws, and I owned part of Tomlin Pet Products. Al had never been out of New York much before, and we're having a Mexican breakfast, and we said, Al, you got to try one of these pickles. Of course, they were jalapenos, they weren't pickles, but he didn't know any better. So he grabbed that 5-star on fire pickle and ate it, and of course he turned red and ran to put the fire out, and we were friends with Al forever, and he got to be big time, and I sold out of Tomlin and
Wow.
never had to compete at that level.
When I was a kid working in a pet shop, I was probably 11, 1968, I think. And we had Four Paws dog cologne. And that was his first product, I think.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then-
shampoo was the first
Oh, it was
product.
shampoo?
Cologne was second product.
Okay, then but Four Paws cologne, I thought, who's going to buy this? But it sold.
It's sold, yeah.
And then he did wee wee pads, and the rest is
wee-wee
history.
History.
That's
yeah.
what made him. I mean, he was on some TV show with Joan Rivers, How'd You Get Your Millions? And he said, wee wee pads.
Yeah.
I did the first wee wee pad for puppies.
Well, if you ask 12 consumers today if they could name a branded pet product,
Yeah,
Hearts would be one of the first names.
right.
Because they know about the grocery store. Kong would be the
Kongs did a great job
And
branding.
every veterinarian in the world recommends a Kong. And then wee-wee pads would come up. And
Yeah.
then Tetramin would come up.
Tetra would come up. Yeah. My gosh. God, thank you for taking me down memory lane like this. This is crazy. I don't know where else to go. I think we covered just about everything. Is there anything that I missed?
Oh,
I'm sure I missed a lot.
I'm sure there's a few things in there, but it's been
maybe we could
great
do-
ride in the industry, and we've been fortunate to meet founders, and I spent so many hours. I mean, one year I worked 39 weekends. One year as a rep doing open houses and trade shows and consumer shows and all that
Wow.
stuff. And we'd spend more time with the sales guys on the floor than we ever spent with our family in some years. It seemed that way anyway.
Yeah.
But interesting people. And what I still love today, if I'm on an airplane and people say, what do you do? I say, I'm in the pet industry. And they say, the what?
I know.
Pet industry, PET. Dogs, cats.
Not
birds.
PETA, pet.
No, that's right. Could you make money doing that? I said, yeah, you can if you work hard. You
Yeah.
can do that. And we've seen some great inventions, and we've seen some not so great inventions.
Yes.
I mean, you think one more quick story. I had a dream one time that we were giving out awards at APPMA for products that never made it. And things that come to mind are the stainless steel spawning strip,
Okay.
or the Uniquarium. Remember the Uniquarium?
No.
Metaframe launched the Uniquarium,
Okay.
and it was the slickest looking thing you ever see. 10-gallon tank with a top with no light on it.
Huh.
Because underneath the aquarium there was a drawer about 3.5 inches tall, and in the drawer you had a light, you had a heater that would go up in the aquarium,
Really?
and you had all the tubing that would go through, and you could keep your fish food there. And Metaframe spent $1 million developing this product and launching it. One problem: they never asked a real fish guy what was wrong with the product, because with the light underneath, where do fish judge their equilibrium from? From the sun.
Yeah.
From the light from above.
Right.
So you had upside down catfish swimming right side
Right
up.
side up.
And that's not the way it's supposed to be. So it was a huge flop. And then Odell, my boss, one of the reasons I left, developed the Hydra Heat aquarium, which was an oil-filled aquarium heater, not aquarium heater, and it was all made out of plastic, and the element was submerged in silicone oil.
I remember
and as
that.
it heated, the oil would expand,
Yeah.
and there was a little attachment in there that would raise up and separate the elements to turn the heater on.
Right.
Great idea, and it was space age, virtually unbreakable.
Yeah.
And we invested $1 million in that project. And the only trouble was, in the factory where we produced it, silicone oil can become airborne.
Right. It's carcinogenic.
Yeah. And we had all these thousands of parts that fit together, and they all got coated with silicone oil.
Oh.
And so when you put them together and you glued them together, there was silicone oil in there. So we wound up with oil slicks in aquariums because the heaters were coming apart.
But the heater worked.
The heater worked beautifully, but they came apart, and it was a disaster because nobody wants to have an oil slick in their aquarium.
No, but I remember that heater. Do you have one?
No, I don't. I wish I did. I got pictures of it, but I don't. In fact, I wanted to, before I came to the show, get up in the top of my barn where I've got a lot of stuff I've collected over the years.
Okay.
And I still have some brochures in there.
Great.
And I'm going to dig that up and bring you some stuff. And we were talking about TFH. I had the good fortune of helping fund a program called Guppies and Groupers, which was on PBS.
Yeah.
And Paul Speece and Bob Chedester, who was the station manager of WQLN in Erie, Pennsylvania, they did a series of great half-hour programs, and they were great friends, and we spent a lot of time together. One day Paul came to a dinner at the show, and he presented me with a page out of a TFH aquarium book, and it was a coolie loach that he had superimposed my face on, and then made up the story and gave it to me from my collection, which I still have. Anyway, a lot of interesting characters.
Well, I'm going to get that song that you sang at Limar.
Oh,
yeah, I have to check that out because I never heard it before. But I knew when you were calling on Limar when you did that song, and they were quite taken back by that.
Well, we had everybody rolling the aisle that day, and the story was my son is a musician, and I gave him all kinds of equipment in his bedroom, and he took a rap song when rap was first beginning, and he took out the words and just had the music, and I made up Limar is a winner to rhyme with the lyrics, and wrote the lyrics, and then at this big dinner that Terry put on at his open house, they invited a few speakers, and I said, well, Terry, I've got something I'd like to award to Limar. We appreciate your business, and he said, sure. Yeah. So I walked in with a boombox, and my hat turned backwards. And he's wondering what's going to happen next. And that happens a lot with me. And so anyway, I pushed on the boombox and did the song.
You did the rap song.
And did the song, and everybody was rolling the aisle. And then I gave him a plaque with the tape on it.
That's great.
And that's the story behind that.
So I love that.
What's great about the pet industry, we have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
57 years in the business, there hasn't been one day I haven't looked forward to going to work.
That's great.
Like you.
I know, same way.
Mm-hmm. And I still enjoy meeting all the young people, and I try to give back to the industry like you have, because the industry's been so good to us.
I know.
And it's still a lot of fun. If you love what you do, if you have a passion, then there's no hard days. Every day's a good day.
That's exactly right. That's a good stopping point. Phil, I thank you so much.
Jerry, my pleasure.
For coming.
Thank you for all you do. And everybody's got to donate to the museum, because we need more funding to build the museum.
We need it to build the physical museum.
Yeah,
so yes,
we do.
So dig down, become a monthly sponsor. All right. Thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Great to see you.
Take care.